Oh, yeah, we got a big fight Saturday night in the desert. Jake Paul going toe-to-toe with former UFC middleweight champion Anderson Silva. Last month, Silva said he'd been knocked out twice during training. Apparently, that's not true. Silva said he misspoke. Jake Paul, not mincing words, saying, quote, "I'm about to fight my idol. Doesn't get any better than that. I want to knock him out within the first 5 rounds," end quote. With more from Glendale, Arizona, here's Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell.
The respect shown all fight week between Jake Paul and Anderson Silva finally switched in the direction of a fight come Saturday night on Showtime pay-per-view. Luke Thomas, inside this arena is where the fight will go down, but they stared off on the stage. Did you catch a little bit of that energy from Jake Paul?
I certainly did. I got a much more intense and aggressive vibe, so to speak. I know that's like what the youth say these days, Brian Campbell, from Jake Paul. I thought that you had an interesting one from Anderson Silva. It's funny, BC, after it was over, I talked to some of the local reporters who were here who got a mini scrum after the face-off with Anderson Silva, and what they were telling me, that what Anderson Silva told them, was that this kid, talking about Jake Paul obviously, doesn't know what he's in for. He doesn't know what a war is. I'm going to show him one tomorrow. A very sudden, quick, hard turn from this was all jovial to now it's time to fight.
Yeah, all the words won't matter once they touch gloves inside that ring. 8 rounds, a catch weight of 187 pounds, but the reason why the betting odds have been flip-flopping ever since this fight was announced, yes, big age discrepancy, 22 years, 47-year-old Anderson Silva, but he's made this adaptation, this switch from MMA to boxing at a faster pace than it seems like anybody else has figured out. That has to be the defining factor. His experience, particularly in the boxing ring, that kind of throws the age out the window against somebody like Jake Paul.
Yeah, the odds have been a weird one. You know, it's kind of funny, too. If you watch what folks inside the MMA industry think, they all think Anderson should win. Maybe not by knockout, but they definitely think he's going to get his hand raised. And then if you talk to folks inside of the boxing world, it's the exact opposite. They think Silva's going to get run over here a little bit. It's interesting, and I think that's what's kind of made this somewhat intriguing. It's made for why there is movement on the lines. But I have to tell you, I mean, yes, Jake Paul's got a big punch. We saw that with Tyron Woodley. He's much younger. He's got a lot of, obviously, a significant youth advantage. And also, you know, he's a big kid, although this is one of the bigger opponents that Jake Paul has fought. We haven't talked too much about that, but that 47 years of age, right? What's the benefit? Of course, tons of experience, way more than Jake Paul could ever have. On the other side, does that create some vulnerabilities? I mean, the guy's closer to 50 than he is 40. That has to count at least some kind of way, even if a guy like Silva appears to have found the fountain of youth.
He still seems to be, to a certain degree, the Silva of old. His upset of former boxing world title holder Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. in Mexico, of all places, last year. Split decision over 8 rounds. That showed us that he can still do something in this space. It's going to depend on how much Jake Paul has improved. 25 years old, 5-0 since making the switch from, you know, social media, disruptor, troller, actor, now the legitimate prize fighter, or so we see. Yes, the cry had been fight a real boxer. He tried with Tommy Fury, he tried with Hasim Rahman Jr. Both fights fell apart. But make no mistake, this is the toughest fight of Jake's career. So how much can we expect him to improve? We saw him late last year in the rematch with Tyron Woodley. It wasn't always looking like a pretty fight. Jake finished it with one big boom. How much more will he have to have grown since then? IQ-wise, technical-wise, toughness-wise, training-wise, to be able to take out Anderson Silva?
Pretty significantly. Now, here's the reality. If you actually watch the first and the second Woodley fight, what you really begin to notice there is that in the second half of both of those fights, a lot of bad habits began to appear. Now, Woodley didn't necessarily take advantage of them. In fact, in the second fight, he got put flat out. But you begin to see things fall apart, which I got to tell you is kind of common for people who are relatively new to combat sports. When they've got a lot of energy, they're very disciplined, they can do the sorts of things they want to do. When fatigue sets in, they kind of resort back to what the sort of standard level of their skill is, not the inspired version. And there were some footwork issues. There were some ring generalship issues. There were some offensive setting up issues. We'll see what happens in the second half of this fight if it goes that far. But the other part is, in defense of Jake Paul, would be that when you're this young and you're this new to the sport, 10 months can be a massive moment for improvement. He should not look the same here as he did, much less in the first Woodley fight. Even the second Woodley fight, he should look significantly improved. And of course, when you're at this age, you get what they call in the gym those newbie gains, right? The gains that happen when you're first kind of getting your feet under you. I expect him to look different. Will it be enough, Brian Campbell? I do not know.
Will he enter into some kind of sophomore slump? We're going to find out Saturday night. He's only been boxing Jake Paul on a serious level 2.5 years. And as he likes to mention, who else has been on pay-per-view this often, just 5 fights, 6 fights into their career, and you remember the names that he beat? Well, it's one thing to knock out former NBA star Nate Robinson all the way through some MMA fighters of old. Anderson Silva is a different kind of boss at the end of the video game, which is why people have been so split. But it's not just going to be these two in the main event. We got former NFL running back Le'Veon Bell on this card, former UFC fighter Uriah Hall, George St. Pierre was in the building, Nate Diaz. So you know the stakes are huge from the standpoint of Jake Paul taking this boxing experiment and now taking it potentially to an even higher level. Who has more pressure on him? Jake Paul to keep this train alive, or Anderson not to get memed, not to get, put in the viral vortex of social media and getting knocked out by the troll and Jake Paul? Who do you think is feeling it more right now?
I'm going to say Jake Paul. I think that's why you saw him hype himself up for. I mean, understand, this is the biggest fight. This is the biggest moment of Jake Paul's life. This is not the biggest moment. This is not the biggest fight of Anderson Silva's life. Not even really close, to be quite honest with you. Even though I recognize there is a real threat that you indicated. But for me, it's got to be Jake Paul having way more pressure on his shoulders. He is the one who picked the fight with the MMA industry. He is the one who is trying to feast off of some of the guys who are done with the UFC, who still want to see what they can do, maybe get a paycheck as well. He's the one picking them off left and right. And now he has really ratcheted up the tensions, both in the ways in which he continues to troll the industry, but also in selecting a very difficult opponent, even at age 47, in Anderson Silva. So knowing that he has a massive challenge in front of him, the biggest one of his life, he's got to be feeling it way more, even if I recognize I don't think Silva is walking in there carefree either.
They call him a serial risk taker, Jake Paul. That would sum it up. So much at stake. A lot of eyes from different parts of the combat sports world and beyond will be on this arena, the Desert Diamond Arena in Glendale, Arizona. So who wins and why when it does take place Saturday night?
Again, depending on who you talk to, you get a very different answer. And to be clear, this is weird. We don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow. That's part of the appeal. But if I had to make a pick, so I will, I'm going to go Anderson Silva. Yeah. I just feel like Jake Paul does have obviously a massive youth advantage, probably a power advantage. But what is, yes, and it's boxing, okay, but competitively, what is Jake Paul going to show him that he's never really seen? I have a hard time believing, especially as I indicated, if this goes to the second latter half, it's an 8-round fight, so rounds 5, 6, and 7, what kind of discipline defensively does a guy like Jake Paul have? I think Anderson Silva is going to have more answers for him as it goes down the stretch.
Jake Paul rode a horse into his own public workout Wednesday night just outside this building. He said it was symbolic that he's entering and ready for battle. A lot of his fights have had early knockouts. There's been boxing. Will this be the first time he has to fight? If he does, I still like Anderson Silva as well at age 47. And I liked him to do it by late stoppage. But you can only find out for yourself. Saturday night, Showtime pay-per-view from the Valley of the Sun. It's Jake Paul. It's Anderson Silva.
That was Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And you can catch both of these guys 3 days a week on the Morning Combat podcast. Plus, they'll be with us all day Saturday to help us get ready for the Paul Silva Showdown and afterwards as well for the aftermath from Arizona.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.